definitely not an expert in the insurance industry in your world. So I stand to be corrected, and I would rely on my fellow panelists for some of the more relevant examples that we can relate with the actual experiences that you have in the industry. So first things first, you know, the less formal title for this topic that I wanted to use was customer experience in the time of coronavirus and beyond. Because it's a different, we live in a different state, and to think that we're going back to our old normal, I think it's the wrong way of thinking of it. So the approach that we should take in thinking about our customer experience is, what is the new normal, if there is such a thing as normal. So we would try to talk about customer experience in the new normal, or the way it is in other companies right now. But in some cases, I'll also talk about how it has changed the company that I work for at the time of the coronavirus. So, like a good corporate employee, I would like to give a disclaimer that these are views of myself and not views of my employer. I'm not going to share any proprietary information for obvious reasons. Right. So they gave a little bit of introduction of me, but just to give you context on like the distance between you and I right now. So it takes about a day and 3 hours to get to Philippines, which I still consider home. I'm in Philippines once or twice a year. Hopefully I'll be there soon when they allow me to travel. I'm a Filipina through and through, and I only came to the States for grad school and stayed here for my career. So I was raised in our family farms in Mindanao, and then was sent to Manila for school. So as they mentioned earlier, I went to Assumption College for my undergrad, worked for a year under the Arroyo administration before leaving for grad school in the States. So this is just like a brief overview of my experiences, just to like set some credibility so you guys know that I actually know what I'm talking about. You know, I have my master's in experimental psychology. I did my Master of Arts and PhD in human factors. So that's an applied cognitive psychology. It's studying how humans interact with systems, processes, computers, and other types of technology. I've worked in quite a few companies through the years. I've had some consulting experiences while in grad school, and then I worked for Honeywell, which I think Honeywell has a presence in Philippines as well. And during that time, I worked on industrial automation solutions. These are the automated systems. An example of this would be the automation that they have at the Conrad Hotel by the Mall of Asia. So if you've been to that hotel, that's one of the key projects that I've led, because that was an acquired company by Honeywell. Then I worked for information protection solutions. That's an enterprise too. So Veritas, I think we have quite a few clients in Philippines as well. So they protect the data for at least 85% of Fortune 500 companies. And then I transitioned to retail, which was Target, before I moved to Best Buy just several months ago. I'm teaching part-time at Kent State University, and I teach user experience design for the master's program there. So during those times, I helped, I'm a founding member of two design and research communities in the Philippines. One is User Experience Philippines, and that's where I met Cheryl Gray, who's in the call right now too. And I'm also a founding member for the CHI Manila, which is the Human-Computer Interaction Manila. So enough about myself. Now let's go to the meat of the conversation this afternoon. What is customer experience? If you Google this term, you're probably gonna see like hundreds or thousands of different definitions from, various people, real experts and people who call themselves experts. And, but we also want to have our own definition that we can all relate to. But before I give you that, box definition that I would leave you with, I want to ask you guys, so can one of you, or maybe my co-panelist, tell me about the best experience you have had with a company, whether right now during a pandemic or maybe, an experience that you've had before. Do you have any examples?
Well, of course, we've been home for the last 2 months. But before the lockdown, I went to Japan, and when you go to Japan, you get the best service anywhere you go there. So I went to a hotel, and well, to me, I measure experience with when you go there and you're acknowledged immediately, and when you ask for information, everybody in the establishment seems to know exactly what the answer to any question is, and they're always very courteous. So to me, that was what really stayed with me until I came home. Mitch, how about you?
Well, I have one experience that I can't forget. Just prior to the lockdown, the day before they actually locked down, my car didn't want to start and I was stuck in the PIRA office. And I called the service center, and they sent a tow truck right away. Within 2 hours, they were in the office, and they didn't know at the time what was wrong with the car. So they towed it back to the service facility of MG. I have an MG. Anyway, problem is the whole city went on lockdown and they weren't able to work on the car. Actually, it's still there. Well, I should be fuming by now, but I'm not. Why? Because I get a call from them every so often saying, "Sir, we know that your car's with us. Don't worry. It's being guarded, etc., etc. But I'm sorry, nobody can work on it because we don't have any workers." So I can't get mad about that, right? So Monday, they called back and said, "Oh, we have workers already. This is what's wrong with your car, and we're already having repaired. You're going to get it in a few days, etc." See, so that's why I'm very happy with them. Even though I still don't have my car, the fact that they're telling me what's happening with it and keeping me informed every step of the way makes me a contented cow.
Yeah.
Jen?
Those are really great examples. Does Ms. Ito have an example too?
Well, mine is also in a hotel, in a restaurant of my favorite hotel in Singapore. It was taking me some time to pick something from the menu. So the waitress said, "Is there a problem? Don't you like anything?" And I said, "Well," she goes, "Can you explain to me what it is you want?" So I did, and she said, "That's not a problem. Our chef will whip it up for you."
Wow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's in a very CXC term, that would be like the level of like a personalized experience, right? As I've mentioned earlier, I've worked in, the tech part of the hospitality industry, but you do look at customer experience in a more holistic way, right? So you have the actual service component of that customer experience, but how does technology help with improving the experience that your hotel guests or customers would have with the company? So I would like to relate to you one of the best experiences that I've had with an insurance. It's my experience with insurance is obviously as the insured. It was about 10 years ago when I was still doing my PhD and we were living in Kansas, and Kansas is Tornado Alley. One year, my husband is in the service, is in the Air Force. And so we are, we can get a USAA insurance for our home and everything else. So one tornado season, there was tornado and hailstorm. So golf ball size hail just hailed on us, on our house. And so it was also our first house. I was in grad school and I've never had a house before. I've never, the only thing I know about insurance is like you pay for it, but I've never really had claims. Like I had a car insurance when I was in college in Manila, and I had a wreck one time, but let's not talk about that. But my mom took care of everything, right? So I really didn't know what was the journey for that. But in this case, so we, my husband also, he is as old as I am, so he really didn't have an experience as well. But when this happened, so our roof was completely damaged. All we had to do was to call the hotline for USAA. And then they ask us our policy number. And then they already know that a tornado came through the address that we have on file. And then they said, okay, we'll have someone on the way and your check is gonna be in the mail in 2 days. So the check was in the mail in 2 days. They already know what's wrong. Like they have their partners check the house. And in less than 5 days, we have a new roof fully installed. And then they even changed the roof for our dog's dog house. So for me, that was the best customer experience because I didn't feel any friction, right? So at that point, right, the only interaction I've had was that, the only reason why I touched base with them was because something bad has happened. But what they did was to alleviate that negative emotions and negative feeling and an uncertainty that I have by just providing the service that that we are paying for. So, suffice it to say, it really raised the bar for me of how a customer experience should be. Now, let's talk about the opposite of that. Do you guys have any example of the worst experience you have had with a company?
Well, I cannot think of any specific incident, but I've had a lot, and I think the experience is the opposite of what I mentioned. I've been to many establishments, and then I don't know if you experience that you enter the establishment and no one acknowledges you, and you start to look around to see who can I talk to, where do I inquire about anything, and no one is looking at you and no one is noticing you. I think that's the worst feeling, especially for a senior citizen like us, no? So I think that's so I get a lot of those now. so there.
Yeah, I like that you pointed that out because, and we'll talk a little bit about that later too, because there's, that's a very in-person type of experience, but there's also there is a possibility of experiencing that even in a digital interaction, right? How does a customer feel if you keep on interacting with a company or a product or a service, and every single time you go there, and you go there all the time, it seems like the system or the company still doesn't know you. So how does that make you feel, right? It might be a digital interface or an interaction, but it doesn't change the emotions that it provides the customer. How about Mitch? Do you have an example of a worst experience?
I wouldn't say it's worse, but it's irritating. You go to a department store, you want to buy undies, for example, or something, and you have half the store following you because, can we help you? Or maybe this is a better brand, blah, blah, blah. And you want to buy your underwear. You don't want to show the whole world what brand you're wearing or what size your waist is. So it's irritating. Small. But sometimes too much service can be irritating too.
Yeah, and that's I like that you are pointing that out, because there's always we always need to strike that balance too. What is too much? what is irritating, right? What's the critical level that we would reach wherein our customer would get irritated instead of feeling honored or catered to, right? So even in the digital space, you could get that feeling. So a very basic example is like you're visiting a website for a company and they have all these pop-ups popping up, right? You kind of want to have some personalization and some, you know, new flavor when you go to a digital experience. But if it's so you know, if it's just there and in your face, then it gets too much. Ads are also an example of that. The example, go ahead.
We've got a few good examples from our participants here.
Okay.
If you'd like to look at it. Okay,
Yeah,
like one says, this is from Nanette, internet service provider. They sent a bunch of people to begin house-to-house applications, and we were excited because these people promised an activated account by the end of the month. Fast forward to 2 months later and no updates. I've tried following up multiple times, and until late last year, someone from their end calls me and tells me that they haven't really moved forward with covering our village. And contrary to what the house-to-house people promised, even if we applied first, it still won't be a reserved slot for us. Aha. So they're not keeping up with their promises.
That's from Pochola Garcia.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
that's from Pochola?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Nanette says, most of online customer service with long queues and not on real time. Oh, especially if you're talking to a chat bot. That's horrible.
Yeah.
There's somebody from, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like the first example is, you know, just like false, you know, providing false expectations to your customers, right? So that's certainly like they have their own goal, and that's the reason why they have that activity of going to each village, whatever that goal would be. But definitely, like, was the goal for the benefit of their customers? Probably not. It's probably benefiting the company more than the customers, and you know, it's probably a for-profit benefit, but was it a wise decision? Based on the reaction from our attendee, then it is not. Because if you're remembering the company because it's a worst experience, it's probably not a good CX. One of the worst experience that I've had, and I intentionally just put a question mark here because I know that we are probably recording our session, was the last flight that I had to Philippines over the holidays. Delta Airlines recently had a partnership with Korean Air. And so I was excited because that's only one layover before I get to Manila. There's no direct flight coming from Minneapolis. And so I fly Delta from Minneapolis to Korea, to Seoul, Incheon, and then they have Korean Air from Incheon to Manila. So I'm so excited. It's Christmas. You have all this pasalubong for my niece and nephews. And then, you know, I have a pretty good level of mileage because I travel a lot for work. But when I got to the airport, they told me that, yes, you can carry all this luggage because of your status to Korea, but from Korea to Manila, you can only carry one. And I'm like, where am I going to put my luggage when I get to Korea if you're only going to let me carry one? Like, why do you even have partnership between airlines if, you know, if the promise that you've made doesn't cover the entire journey? It doesn't make sense, right? And like, I'm a platinum status. Like, is this the way you would treat people who have high status in your program? So that's super worst experience. I ended up just taking one of my luggages, and we ended up like having to ship and then go through customs again, the rest of the stuff that I have. So it was the worst experience. I'm probably not gonna fly that route ever again. I'm gonna stick to the Tokyo route.
Mm-hmm.
So now we go to the definition, right? In this, you know, I'll let you read it on your own too, but allow me to read it in front of you. So how do we define CX? So we define CX as the impression that you leave with your customer, resulting in how they think of your brand and maybe how they feel about your brand too, across every stage of their journey. So if you look at this definition, there's no mention of technology, right? You know, it doesn't say that a good CX, a customer experience, is like the most high tech of all interactions or channels, but it focuses on the experience of the person, right? Whether it's your customer or your agents or any stakeholders that are interfacing with your company and the products that you're selling. And here there's an emphasis on what it leaves, the impression that it leaves your customer, because, you know, like what we've discussed with our examples, impressions are what would bring you back to the product. It's the experience that you've had that would encourage a person to tell their friends about your company, and to be loyal, brand loyalty. And then when we are talking about every stage of the customer journey here, like the example that we've had from one of our attendees about, cable, internet provider companies, they're only thinking about the selling part, or maybe just gathering the wants from a potential location, but they haven't really thought about how does this transfer to the entire journey of their customers, right? How would you even bring your customers to like the part wherein they're already using their product if they're already disappointed with you from the very beginning? Why would they even sign up for the service if you're already treating them like crap, right? So I want to anchor us with this definition, because I think this is very important to center ourselves around the importance of like that, the psychology of it, the importance of leaving a good impression and a good feeling about your brand, a good idea about your brand whenever any customer would interface with the company and your product. Any questions about the definition before I move forward?
Pretty clear.
Right. So there's a lot of changes that have happened in the way we run business. So the way we're running business right now means that we have just a lot of channels. So there's a lot of terminology that we hear, right? We hear omni-channel, multi-channel, channel-agnostic, etc. It means that the way our customers are interfacing with our companies are just, just a multitude of different things. It's because we have more technology now, better connectivity, hopefully Philippines. Then, people have more access to technology, right? Like technology is accessible in a way such that, in whatever level you are in our social strata, you are able to access technology in one way or another. And adoption to technology is also higher than before. There's, just a greater appetite to using new technology. So it also means that our demographics are changing, right? When the demographics have changed, that affects all the factors that I've already mentioned before. And when I say demographics, right, it includes like our age groups, the gender, how we think about gender, for example, and the type of our abilities or different abilities that our customers would have. Then we can also talk about globalization, right? We might still have very unique experiences depending on the countries or the localities that we are at, but there's a lot more uniformity or similarity into the experiences that companies offer across the globe, especially for companies that are global, because they can build experiences from one country and just like, add the local flavor for that experience when they transfer to a new region. So the point that I want to make for this slide is that, yes, we know that we have this multiple channels, and we know that because we're working for the company. And based on our pre-session survey that we have, it seems like there's a lot of you that are already operating within these channels. But the thing is, a really good customer experience is that we know it, our customers do not have to feel it. So I want to I want that to sink in for a little bit, right? So what that means is that, yes, we have a website, we have an app, they can call our phone, they can go to the office, can interact with their social media. And those are very different things, but they should not feel that they're different. So when they're interacting with one, the experience should be seamless, such that if they transfer from one channel to another, they would not have to relearn how the process works. So that's an indication that there was a strategy behind our digital transformation. To put it really bluntly, right? Like sometimes you create an account on a website, then they'll require you to create an account on the app, and then whatever purchases that you have, it doesn't transfer across because it's just two separate platforms. The back end doesn't talk to each other. So as a customer, right? For example, you talk to a customer support person, and then you tell them what you bought, and then they're only monitoring one platform, but then they cannot see the other. So then you have to explain yourself where you purchased it. So that's an example of a bad strategy, right? It's digital, right? We transformed into a digital space, but it doesn't mean it's a good transformation. Now, what are the downsides?
Jen, can I'm sorry, Mitch. I'd like to interject here a while. Jen, I'm going out on a limb here a little bit because based on the poll, it says there that a big percentage of our listeners now are into some sort of digital transformation. But after you said what you said regarding omnichannels, I think that is an area where a lot will still be lacking as far as being consistent in different platforms. So I think that is my impression. I could be wrong, but that is how I see the industry for the insurance industry. I don't know if Mitch will share that same opinion.
Actually, I was just going to give a particular example for what you said, Francis.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of member companies within PIRA, sometimes we use third parties or like call centers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And the call centers they're not exactly insurance people.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have access to a screen that tells them the information to give to their clients, but they don't know the whole story. And for sometimes simple questions, they say, "I'm sorry, but we'd have to, get back to you, etc., etc."
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the frontliners don't really know the whole story. So there's some kind of a disjoint between using the services of a third-party provider and what the third-party provider tells the client, who thinks the third-party provider is you, right? Because they're supposed to be representing you. So I think that's a common problem.
Yeah, and I really love those examples that you both have mentioned, because that lends really well to the second part of our discussion later, which is customer journey mapping, right? When we think of customer experience, we have to think of it from an end-to-end experience standpoint. We have to look at the experience of our customer with our company as a journey. What does that mean, right? We don't have, we should not think of it as individual touch points. Like, for example, I'm going to hire this company to build our app. They're going to make a really, really great app. And so we're going to have the most awesome app in the App Store, and we'll have 5 stars. But then people who are using the app could call like the customer support as well. Then they'll have like super bad experience when they call customer support because they haven't thought about that part. Because those are two or more disjointed experiences. And later on, we're going to talk about that a specific example, right? Like, for example, if it's a use case of, someone trying to buy a new policy or like a new car, for example, say I can relate with that example better. What are the different tools that they have to interface with? Who are the people that they would have to interact with throughout that journey, from the point of them thinking about buying something up to the point that they're using it, to the point that they need some servicing or support. How do you design that experience? So again, think of it as a journey and not as individual touch points. So, and I think that's the main goal of our conversation today, right? We're not gonna be able to cover everything in detail, but if there's one thing that I would want all of you to take away from our conversation, is that, you know, a good customer experience is thinking through the end-to-end experience that your customer would have with your product or service, and not just that one individual thing that they're using or interfacing with. Should I move forward?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so, you know, like we have all these benefits that we get from, you know, technology, when, if and when done correctly, but are there downsides to digital transformation? You know, when done right, technology should not replace humans, right? You know, and especially with the, you know, the cultural factors that we have and the unique Filipino attitudes towards insurance, it's quite different from the experiences that I've had in the States, where a lot here are just defaults, like you really have to do it. But, you know, it, at least in the context of our country, for example, the human element is important, and it's still important everywhere. So in a lot of cases, when we think of digital transformation, not just in the insurance industry, but other industries as well, there's that, you know, at the back of my mind, there's that fear that, is this technology going to replace me? How is it going to affect my job if we move forward with this new thing that the company would be using? You know, one thing that I want to emphasize here is that when done right, it should not replace the humans that are working for that industry or for the company. What it would do is that it would shift the responsibilities of the humans themselves, and it should be tools for the humans to use to make them better at their jobs, and for them to be focused on what they do best, to be humans, to have that human interaction and build relationships with their customers, because that's what machines and systems cannot do. So let me give an example, right? So when we do not do technology, digital transformation right, when, let's say, your website, for lack of a better example, websites or apps or whatever, or software are not usable, your agents or your employees will then spend more time trying to figure out how to use these things, you know, trying to not get lost, trying to not lose their data, instead of focusing on talking to your customers. But when you ensure that the experiences of your tools are done correctly, all of those manual tasks that your people used to be doing should be way easier, right? They're not gonna file paper anymore. They're not gonna, like, you know, I don't know, print stuff anymore, because they can just send that digitally. So now they have more time in their hands to actually build and cultivate that relationship that you have with your customers.
Jem,
So,
that's a very, excuse me, that's a very important point you brought up, because I think many companies actually put that side by side, meaning digital transformation, and then, but you lessen your personnel to justify the digital transformation expense. So I think that's a very common idea. Well, as far as I know, but I completely agree with you. I think it should not be the case that nobody should lose their jobs, but they should just be probably shifted to another task, which they have more time to do now.
yeah. So we should also, you know, like a good company that thinks about customer experience should not forget your own people, right? Because it's your people who would cultivate that good experience with your customers. And I think that's just, that's not just philosophically sound, but it's also, financially sound as well. If you already have people that you've already trained, technology will not work perfectly all the time. And Chell Gray is very familiar of my involvement with inclusive design, for example. Not everybody will have the same level of expertise or adoption level to technology, right? You'll have clients or customers who are older, who might not be able to use the technology that we have. We have people who have some limitations visually, hearing, mobility, right? People who have disabilities, for example, they might have difficulties using our technology. So there are those pockets of society that they're not really a small pocket, right? You have to think of that as your opportunity spaces for you to grow the business. So while you are relieving all these manual tasks for your people, you should not be thinking that it's going to replace their role for everything. Now you're just going to reposition it, right? You're just going to pivot them to where it is their skill set would be most valuable. I see like something blinking. Are there questions that I need to address at this point?
No, I don't think so. I can continue, Jen.
Okay. So now let's go through examples. I love that in the survey that we had, some transformation examples were asked. So again, I prefaced our talk earlier saying that I'm not an expert in insurance industry. So I have, like we can call it parallel industries that are not exactly the same thing. And this industry is very particularly close to me and I'm pretty familiar with. So let's talk about retail. Retail has gone through a lot of changes this last decade or so, this decade or more. More so in, in the more Western countries and more in highly industrialized country, and probably a little bit less in Philippines because the state of retail there is quite different. And maybe we can talk about that example later too. The retail transformation in the States is that, the way it looks, this is a crowded mall in the States right now. So the reason for those challenges is that, cost of real estate is so high, right? So if the cost of real estate is high, then that would affect the prices that you're selling at a store. Then because you have a footprint, then your inventory would be limited because you can only put an inventory that would fit in that footprint that you have for a brick and mortar presence. Then because you can only keep limited inventory, then the availability of choices and items are also limited. Meaning, right, if you're looking for a shoe, a pair of shoes, of certain color and certain sizes and certain whatever configuration, you might not always get it at a local store because they might have run out of that specific configuration that you're looking for. Then there's also a lot of changes in our society, right? People are more on the go. People work remotely, especially now. People are looking for like convenience aspects of things. And then there's also like the decentralization, if you may, right? Like right now, you don't have to live in the metro to be hip or cool, right? You can live like my sister, you can live in the farmlands in the south of the country and you still want to be fashionable, right? You don't need to live close to a mall to do that. So with that being said, there are a lot of gaps in retail, right? So a lot of gaps in retail. And when there are gaps, a really smart company could come in and fill that gap and they're gonna make big bucks. So Amazon came, right? So going back to the issues or the gaps that I've addressed earlier, right? Cost of real estate, their distribution centers, where they are and they're everywhere, but they don't have to keep a lot of like their presence where they have to, pay rent or maintain real estate properties. Now,
Jen, Amazon is your competitor, or isn't it your competitor?
Yes.
Okay.
Of everybody, right? So
Okay.
yeah, so I think Lazada or what are the equivalent? Shopee? What were the equivalent in Southeast Asia? I think those
Yeah.
are
Lazada,
equivalent for,
Shopee.
yeah, for
Yes.
these types of
And the
experience.
Chinese brands.
Okay. Yep.
Alibaba.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Yeah, I forgot about
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
similar experiences, right? Like, but the thing is, like, there is a gap, and these types of businesses came in. Now, since they're online, their inventory is not limited anymore because they have this huge thousands of square meter space where everything's there. And so all of these different items are now available. People who are on the move, people who want convenience of things get delivered, too much traffic. I don't want to go to the mall. I don't have time to go to the mall. I don't live in the big city, can now have access to all these items that they can purchase everywhere. And so this is like this gap that this company has filled. And so there's, it disrupted retail altogether. But there's also that critical point because, the level of technology is also different here, right? For example, shipping, Amazon can do shipping within an hour or so already here. So you get items within a day if you have Prime. 2 days is too long for shipping. So there's also that, kind of critical mass of like this opportunity has to be present in a location for all these conveniences to take place. So when companies like this came about, then, about a decade or so ago, they call it the retail apocalypse, right? So there's a lot of foreclosure, there's a lot of like bankruptcy filed. But then again, you look at these companies, and if a lot of you are familiar with how Sears was during the prime of their business, Sears was an innovative company, right? Sears was known for their Sears catalogs. So if you think about it, right, what is the purpose of a catalog? Isn't a catalog, you are sending a list of products that you're selling and allowing people from across the country to buy it from you, right? Isn't that just a manual version of having a website, right? It's a different application, it's a different tool that you're using. But if you come to think of it, that was the basic idea that Amazon has used to start their business. And they started with books. The problem with Sears is that they were innovators up to a certain point and they stopped there. I want to emphasize this because there's a lot of disruption similar to this in other industries as well. Again, I'm no expert in insurance industry, but I want that to be at the back of your head. What are the potential types of business that would disrupt the business that I'm running right now if I'm not nimble enough to adopt and adapt to the new way of doing things? So, Sears have foreclosed their stores, unfortunately. So if you had memories of going to the States when they were still in business, they're not going to be there anymore when you come back. But then the pandemic came, right? Like everything else. Go ahead.
Jen, excuse me. I'd just like to say something at this point. We don't have to discuss it thoroughly, but speaking about gaps, in our business, in insurance, to me, I think the biggest gap on digital transformation is about products as well. But because right now, majority of the companies are into digital transformation, into selling through the internet, but it is confined to a very small number of insurance products. So I'm talking about personal accident, motor car insurance, and travel insurance. But there, in non-life insurance particularly, there are so many other product lines, so to speak, like fire insurance, marine insurance, liability insurance, and a whole array of insurance lines that we are unable to to sell in that format, no, in digital format. So I just wanted to bring that out because speaking of gaps, no, about what I see as gaps.
What are
Just
the
to,
reasons why we can't?
okay.
We,
Let
Mitch,
me
take over.
just to give Jan something similar to the retail store. What Francis is talking about are the bespoke items. You know, if you have a commercial all risk or an industrial concern that you'd like to insure, it's not a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
It has to match the risks that a particular client faces. So it's not something that you can readily sell online. There has to be a lot of analysis or in terms of a suit measurements, etc. And you can't do that online. See, so there are certain things that you need a face-to-face contact with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just one idea, right? Like with the very limited information that I have about this particular scenario, is that it doesn't have to all be digital, right? What are the various configurations that you could use for your multi-channel experience, for your people, for your agents or employees to be still able to use a digital tool, but then still complete that transaction process in a way that would satisfy your customer. Maybe not 100% can be done online, but maybe part of it, right?
Correct.
By the way you're describing it, it could be like a menu of stuff, right? If it's a configuration of things, maybe you could allow your potential client to like pick and select what they want. And then there's a discussion, the next step would be a discussion to make sure that they're selecting the right thing and you have that conversation with them. So, maybe some of the products that you're selling could go completely digital and then, people can make decisions and you can put in defaults that would help them make this better decisions. And then they have an option to have a consultation process. But in some cases, it'll probably a mixture of both. Especially for highly complex or highly technical discussions. Like I myself would probably need a person-to-person or a call, at least a conversation with someone who can explain things for me.
So Jen, so it's perfectly acceptable, therefore, that because I've seen a website of an insurance company that starts, well, of course they're in a digital platform, and then they try to lure you or the customer to to have a conversation. Maybe they will ask, they'll chat with you for a while, but then they open up the option of, can we have a telephone conversation? So that's perfectly all right then.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great segue because I have an example for that from Best Buy later. So it's not insurance, but I'll give an example on how it's done for another company.
All right.
And so I'm gonna speed through this specific one. So like JCPenney during the pandemic recently filed bankruptcy. So that's another casualty in terms of the retail space. But we have the survivors, right? This company, any of you familiar with Target? Yes. So if you have shopped at Target, right, like you know that there's a Target effect. Like people say that I go to Target to buy coffee, and then I come out with like $500 worth of merchandise that I didn't intend to buy. So that means that even in the world of online shopping, Target has this Target effect that people still want to go to their physical store, right? So there's something unique about Target that it's like SM because you can buy, you have your grocery there, you have your apparels, you have toys, something for everybody in the family. And so, for moms who are trying to have some time off from their family can go there and, just spend time, enjoy, and do shopping. So there's that piece. And they've survived this retail apocalypse. The other one, and there's more, but these are just the two that I'm most familiar with. And Best Buy is the company that I'm working for right now. And we're still here. But what did they do, right? they're doing well, even right now during the time of the pandemic. They've survived the pretty challenging time that others did not survive. And so let's talk about what changed, right? These are your typical brick and mortar store just a decade or so ago. You know, it would be hard for them to compete with a giant like Amazon. But what did they change to survive? They didn't remove their stores, right? Target still has 1,800 stores around the country. Best Buy still has 1,231 stores in the US, Canada, and Mexico. So it's not like they didn't really, right? You know, when you hear digital transformation, it doesn't mean that you're going to do away with those that are not digital anymore, but there's a good mixture of that. So in terms of specific to the Target experience, and I promise I'm going to go back to the example that I promised earlier. So what is Target doing right now? So they have an app and they have the website. The website is adaptive. So that means that it is mobile friendly because a lot of our users right now for websites are always on the go. So if your website would not function well in a small screen, then you're not doing websites good. That's pretty basic nowadays. So if your website is not mobile friendly, you know, rethink that strategy. So with that digital presence for Target, they have a same day delivery service. They acquired a company called Shipt in 2017. Shipt requires you to have membership, yearly or monthly membership, but you can also pay per delivery. So what it means is that, you know, you order something, it could be your grocery or anything from a Target website, and you can choose the time slot when they would deliver it, and then they'll deliver it within the same day to your door. During that time that they were shopping, you can have conversations with your shopper. So you kind of have like a personal shopper. You can give instructions on how you want your apples or your bananas, how ripe you want the bananas, or if there's out of stock for the things that you order. You can have that back and forth conversation for the person shopping for you. And then the way that technology works is that if you have like a good relationship, if you tipped or rated your shopper pretty highly during your previous transactions, they would actually bring that same shopper back to you. So you're building this human connection when you're doing business this way. Then they also have order pickup. What does this mean? You order online and then it's ready within 2 hours, and then you can go to the store. Inside the store, just go to the counter, show your app, you know, show the barcode, that your QR code in your app, and then they'll just have your stuff ready. So you're still going to the store, but then you don't have to spend so much time at the store. So imagine yourself coming from work, you know, you have a few minutes of time probably during traffic, you're ordering your stuff there, you arrive at the store, it's already ready, and you don't have to go and fall in line in the cash register. Then there's a drive up option, which is very similar to order pickup, but if you're driving to the store, all you have to do is you turn on your app and, you know, order stuff from the app, and then just say, I'm on my way when your order is ready. The app actually geolocates you. So the store knows that you're coming. Isn't that cool? So you arrive at the parking lot, they already know the color of your car, the type of your car, because you entered it into app. And then the store associate would just come out with your stuff in it already. So at the time of you know, coronavirus, they would just go directly to your trunk. And so you're still social distancing even when you're doing that. Pretty smart, right?
Yeah.
There's also like what people don't know about Target, unlike, you know, Amazon Prime, when you have 2-day shipping with Amazon Prime, you're actually paying for that service. It's over $100 a year. So it's really not free shipping. But at Target, they offer 2-day shipping for $35 or more order, and that's actually free. So that's just standard. That's how fast their delivery is nowadays. They also have these other things, right? Subscription, you get 5% off if you're, you know, like things like toilet paper or your laundry detergent that you use over and over and you run out for a certain cycle, you know, that you're going to run out in 2 weeks. You can put that in subscription and it automatically delivers to your door. And if you set it up that way, then you have 5% off for your purchased items. So there's also that piece about when you buy something from online or from the store, you can return it whichever way. So, right, like if you buy something online, you can go to your nearest store and return it if you don't like it. Or if you buy something from the store and if you don't have time to go back to return it to the store, you can just send it out to the post office and they can return it to Target, and you get credited back for the items that you returned. So I'm giving you these examples because this is this kind of shows those different channels that people are using, but it just flows seamlessly, right? You use this one thing, but then the company just knows it's you, and it provides you, right? If it's a retail store, what do you need from a retail store? What's the use case? What's the reason why a retail store exists? To get me the things that I need most at the time that I need it. It's that simple, right? And so with that premise, that's why they have these different options for their customers to get what they need at a timing and schedule that they prefer. That's, that's the strategy. So, I'm saying that out loud because I might not know how to completely translate that in your businesses, but, think of how your strategy to be framed that same way. And I'm gonna show a video right now, because what I want to drive is like, with all this digital transformation that Target has had, they have not forgotten about the people aspect as well. Sorry. There, I think I already loaded it. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
Strong, the mother, her 2-year-old. For this Arizona mother, it was a rare moment. Demi Garza-Pena was shopping at Target with her 2-year-old son when he stopped her in her tracks. There in that store, little Ollie was struck by an ad showing another young boy just like him.
It was just a beautiful moment to see, him just admiring somebody like him, because I didn't get to see that very often.
His mother, Debbie, writing about the moment, posting it on Facebook, saying Oliver sees kids every day, but he never gets to see kids like him. Tonight, Target telling us they learned of this moment just today and said inclusivity is part of everything we do. His mother hoping to spread awareness about inclusion. Oliver was born with a rare condition that affects his lower spine, but his mother says it's never stopped him. Ollie, she says, likes to stay on the move. And whether it's on the swing in the pool or shopping with mom, tonight she tells us she's grateful.
To see their kids not included, because we don't get that often.
All right, I hope you heard that. Did you hear it?
It was a little bit choppy, but it's understandable.
Yeah. So I think the whole point of this video is just, trying to drive that point of like, you might completely go all digital. The company's doing it really well. But one thing that they did not forget are the unique needs of like different segments of their population, right? You don't leave anyone behind. And that's where your opportunity is. It's not, an added expense. It's not an added task, but there is an opportunity of thinking about people with different needs. And especially in insurance industry, that's really something that we have to think about. Look at the numbers even, and look at, the size of the business that this segment of the population can bring you. And Target also has treated their people well. The way technology is being developed, right? When I was there, we have a team focused on building and designing and doing research on the customer experience. But there is also a team, and my team was a research team, so we cover both customer and employee, that are building tools and technology for our employees to help them do their job better so they can have better relationships with our customers. Now, for Best Buy, so very similar, but a little bit different. And I think this has, this will answer the questions that you have earlier too. Who has gone to Best Buy here? Who doesn't want to go to Best Buy if you're an electronic?
My wife.
So, right, do people go to Best Buy because you want hands-on experience and stuff, or if you're just curious about like new tech that's coming out, but you're not ready to buy, everything is just out there for you to try. But if you're shelling a big amount of money, you probably want to at least feel and touch and feel it before you even throw that money around and give it to a company. But so it's the experience of being there. But the other piece of that is, if you're buying something that you're not quite familiar with, Best Buy is also known for our store associates who are able to give expert advice to people. So do you see the parallels there, right? As opposed to how Target's type of products that they're selling, Best Buy is a little bit different because this needs a little bit of technical expertise. And I think it's not the same, but it lends really well with the insurance industry, right? Somebody could try and, sound very savvy and familiar with insurance, and they think they know what they know what's appropriate for them. But if and when they need help, someone with an expertise should be there to provide information for them. The way Best Buy has transformed itself is that, we have a similar thing as the drive up. So this one is like curbside pickup, that, you go to the parking lot and your product will be brought out to you, delivery at home too. But here, the unique thing here, and Francis, I think this is one of the things that you were asking earlier, is that we also have like consultations, right? So you can go through the website or to the app, and you can interact with a bot, or you can you can finish all your transactions online. But if you have questions, then there is a virtual consultation, or you can choose a channel that you would interact with our folks too. Best Buy also has home installation services, right? Because not everybody can install these things. And if you're trying, at least in the States, right? If you're trying to buy a new fridge or new washer and dryer, or microwave, for instance, you would probably need a professional to do that for you. And if you're buying it from the store, you could get the installation service from the company as well. So there's that in-home piece, right? They're doing installation, but in terms of a parallel, there's also that in-home interaction that I think is also present in the insurance industry.
Yeah, and then Jen, I think when we were talking, you also said something about the people from the store can help you choose which is the right model, the right size for your home.
Yeah. So, and that can also be in person also. It's a little tricky now because of COVID. They still do it if the customer really wants to. But for example, if you are, remodeling your home, or you're just interested in putting together a home entertainment center, for example, and this is a quite expensive set of technology, but you're not sure what to get. So there are also professionals that are present there who would give you advice based on the configuration of your home, the size of your home, what are your needs, right? Are you like a music buff, or are you just doing it for like your kids because you just need an entertainment center for them? Somebody can be assigned to you and give you advice on like what stuff do you need for your specific need. And you also have an option to have someone come into your home, so they exactly know, they can measure stuff with you. You can point out where you would want it installed for them. So there's also that in-home interaction component for these things. Home gym is an example for that too.
So Jen, the equivalent of that in the insurance industry is our financial advisors and our agents and brokers, right? So
Right.
they're the equivalent of that.
Yeah, so like and I think it's a beautiful parallel if you think about it, right? Because you know, the scheduling piece right now, let me see if it's gonna pull up. Right, so you can do, like, here is an example of, this is the live website, by the way. So here you can virtual in-home consultation because of COVID, right? So here, you know, it's digital. You can schedule an appointment for your consultation and they'll have a call with you. If you're more comfortable to just be on the phone, because not everybody wants to be in a video call like us right now, right? But if you are comfortable with a video call, then you can opt to have that. So here, right, like, so I think, Francis, this is what we were talking about earlier, that yes, you do something digitally without someone walking you through setting up an appointment. You choose it on your own, but then you still deal with a human person to have that person-to-person interaction, whether virtually or you know, actual in person when we are allowed to do so. I hope it works now, because if you were not able to hear it earlier. So there's a couple of videos here that I want to show, because this is an example. It's just showing like when people go to the homes of our customers.
If you need a hand with your appliances, networking, and other items, I've got some good news. Best Buy is doing deliveries, installs, and repairs in customers' homes again. Safety is our top priority when we visit your home. So in order to protect our customers and employees, we'll closely follow all CDC recommended guidelines. Let me walk you through some of the important steps we'll take before, during, and after your appointment. Let's start with what happens before we come to your home. First, our employees will start every day with a self-health check. Then we'll give you a call to let you know we're on our way and go over a few new safety measures. Finally, we'll make sure we have plenty of safety equipment and cleaning supplies with us. During the visit, we'll put on a mask, gloves, and other safety gear the moment we arrive. After that, we'll make sure we're at least 6 feet apart from you at all times. We'll even mark off the perimeter of our work area so you can talk to us and we can demonstrate your product from a safe distance. Another thing we'll do before we leave is clean and disinfect any surfaces we may have touched. After the service is complete and we've left your home, there are a few final steps we'll take. To make sure we're just as safe for the next job, we'll clean and sanitize all our tools, devices, and supplies. And lastly, we'll clean and disinfect any commonly touched surfaces in our vehicles. Like I said, nothing is more important than the safety of our customers and employees. That's why we're taking these precautions to perform the in-home services you need. Because even in uncertain times like these, you can count on us.
Hope you guys heard that.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm pretty proud of that. It's my team who's actually designed that experience.
Pretty good.
So,
Jen?
yeah. Yes.
Jen? We have a question here from one of the techies in the group. He goes, what Jen has shown so far are the end products of the design process. Does she have a segment or slide on steps of how to design the process?
Yes, and we'll get to that shortly. I'm glad that you're interested in it, though. We will have a more detailed, like, second segment for this.
So I was wrong. It won't be light.
Sabi niya raw, super interested ako. Techie kasi yun eh. If I call you nerd kanina, Francis, he's the super nerd. Right, Chris?
So I can, you know, it's in later slides, but I want to address that. I don't want to leave that question hanging. So the video that you've shown, you're right? That's the end product. And I'm glad that you recognize that. And my team is actually the one who worked on that. So the how piece was research is definitely the first step for that one. So if you've noticed, right, that technically that service is really like, we go to your home, do installation for you. That's simple. But if you can see in the video, it actually thought out the entire experience, right? Like it thought out what are the worries of our customers. So like those are the things that we ask. If we're gonna go back, because we stop all our in-home service for several weeks, because we're still learning about COVID-19, we want to make sure that we're keeping our customers and our employees safe. And we want to make sure that we have the technology and processes in place to make it work when we do go back to the homes. So when we were trying to study this, so like definitely in terms of process, research is one, and asking the right questions is one, right? So for example, what are your current needs? When we're in a COVID situation, what are your needs for a company like Best Buy to still go to your home? So then you would learn like, oh, I need this and that, right? I cannot talk about specifics, but, and I apologize for that. But so, you know, an example in what you saw in a video is that, you know, appliances still break, you guys, right? We might be in quarantine, but things still break. So we still need people to fix it for us. So like if you still need fixing at your homes during pandemic, then you ask in research, what are your concerns? So, you know, based on what you've heard, they're concerned about their own safety, but we've learned that people are inherently good. They're concerned about the safety of the employees. And that's why the end product kind of shows you how we're going to take care of you by saying that we're going to wear this, we're going to clean it up. But it also shows that, hey, as a company, we're providing these things for our employees to make sure they are safe, and you should not feel bad if you ask them to come into your home. So research is one part of the process. And then there's a collaboration between researchers and designers. And when I say designers, right, it doesn't have to be like designers who are like drawing things or stuff like that. It's process designers, like experts like yourselves. We talk to, you know, to people who are very familiar with the processes in the industry. And then we actually break the process apart. So how did we, you know, things like, how did we used to do in-home servicing and what has changed in the process now? So literally draw out the process, draw out the journey from before, and then where did it break? Where does it break in the current situation that we have, and how do we address that? So after we have, you know, that hypothetical solution that we draw out, then we go back to the drawing board and say, okay, in what situation will this not work? What are the worst case scenarios that we have not thought about yet that might break this entire process apart, right? So in the current world that we live in, you know, even if you design the best system and all that, one scenario would be like the state governor might say like, you just cannot operate. So that, you know, then you stop business, right? There are instances wherein maybe at the last minute, the customer would say no because they feel unsafe. Then what is the protocol for your employee? So, you know, for, you know, in the less designy term, it's really like the logic of it, right? When I talked about journeys earlier, it's literally like a step-by-step thing. What are the step-by-step processes that our customers and our employees go through? Where does it break, and how do we address the pain points and the breakage that they would experience throughout? I'm gonna move forward, and you know, this slide is also emphasizing, similar to how Target is, that there is that human piece of it, right? There's complete digital transformation, but one of our, you know, the biggest differentiator for us as a company is really the human aspect. When I do research, specifically when we present research, it's always that piece of where does our employee fall into this future state, right? Let's not forget our employees. They are our people. So how are we going to address their needs? So, you know, we transform as a business, but we're not forgetting that they are people too. And we're not only taking care of customers, but our employees as well. And here's just a picture of our Geek Squad. I like this picture because like we call them agents as well. You know, this is very superficial parallel, but I think it's kind of cool, right? So, you know, one of the things that Best Buy is popular about is that we're using, you know, environment-friendly vehicles. And these are the agents that would go to people's home to like help them fix stuff. Imagine like your grandparents or your parents who cannot figure stuff out, or things that need fixing in your house and you need a tech person to come, you know, someone like this would show up at your home and give you guidance and expert advice. So before we go, let's go to just one part of the process. But before we go, just to sum it up, right? When we talk about digital transformation, it just needs to happen. As simple as that, right? So it's like you transform or you perish. But for you to transform, you have to have a strategy. You have a strategy that should allow your people, your company to adapt to the new way of doing things. But you also have to have a strategy for your customers to adopt the changes that you are making, right? So for example, right, like if you build this new tech, but then you didn't think about the usability, the experience that your customers would have in your new experiences or touch points, then nobody would use it anyway. So that means that you just wasted your money. And in Philippines, there's a growing, in fact, like I mentioned earlier, I'm one of the founding members for that. There's a growing community of user experience professionals that could help you out with that. And I hope you make use of those talents that are already in the country. So, and then when we transform, we have to make sure that we don't forget the human element and keep that front and center, because at the end of the day, it's our customers that we need to make and, to build, it's our customers who bring us business. It's our people who make business happen. And so they should be at the front and center of any strategy that we build. Now, when we transform our experiences, our customer experience, it has to be designed and implemented seamlessly, right? I emphasize the word design because it has to, someone has to think through how it flows, right? How they would hang together. When you try to do transformation, I think one of you mentioned earlier that, you would hire someone makes an app and then, but it's a third party that would provide your customer support. Someone, as a company, you should sit together and say, okay, what are the different aspects that our customers touch base with us and how do they flow together? If you're paying a third party to provide your customer support, they're getting the money from you. You should demand for them to know your company, to provide the type and level of service that you would want to provide for your customers. Because as you mentioned earlier, I'm not sure it was Mitch or Francis, but they're your frontliners, right? Nobody cares. Your customers don't care if they're third party or not. In their heads, they're calling your company. So you have to make sure that that's part of the experience that you're stitching or designing for the business. So how, right? So now we're transitioning to how piece. And I don't want this presentation to like make y'all feel that this is the only process, is only one of it. And we probably need a separate session just to cover everything, but I kind of want to like give a little bit of information about some parts of the how. One is, I mentioned it over and over already during the past hour or so. So we need to understand the journeys that our humans go through. I say humans because it could be our employees, our agents, other stakeholders, and our customers. And you really need to like detail that out to understand what they go through, what their pain points are, because if you don't know what the problems are, you cannot really fix it. You don't know, you cannot, don't start solutioning, right? Deciding if it's an app, if it's a website or whatnot, that's solutioning. That's not your first step. Your first step is to understand their journey, understand what the pain points are before you even make any decision. A classic example in customer experience and user experience is that at the end of the day, your solution might just be a good old paper and pen or a good old spreadsheet. It might not be the fanciest software in the world, but you would never know that, right? You would end up spending way much if you didn't try to understand what issues are first. So this one activity that I could cover today would be customer journey mapping. What What does it mean? So it's really just a map. It's a visual representation of the experience of your customers that they have with you. It helps to tell the story of the customer experience with your brand and how they engage with it. And then it helps build a long-term relationship between the person and the brand. I've just gathered like some examples in the web. I originally planned to have like an interactive session, but I was telling Chell that I was like trying to practice this out yesterday, and I think we won't have time to do that. I would rather have you some understanding of what it actually means and is for before we do a practice run. So for this is like a blank slate, right? So this is an example, and I think Ms. Ito has suggested that maybe we can look at the selling piece, right? How would I sell? How do I call it? Do I call it policies? How would I sell
a policy? Yeah.
Policy? How would I sell a policy to a customer at this specific point in time, right? And then we can build a journey for that. And that's, you can even name your customer. You just pick a specific customer. And as a researcher, a good rule of thumb is, you probably have a feel of, for a specific type of insurance, you probably know your market, right? What's the big chunk, right? If you have this big demographics of your potential clients, what is the biggest chunk that you want to account for? Let's for example, let's pretend that you're looking for like middle-aged, working from somewhere, female or whatnot. So, just pinpoint that just so we can outline their journey. Now, if it's for a specific insurance, you have a better idea of like, what's the goal for this specific customer? Why would this customer need this type of insurance? Right? I don't have an answer for that for you, but maybe that's something that you can write down right now as you're listening to me, or maybe later do this homework with your colleagues. So, if you're trying to sell this type of insurance to a specific person, what are the goals of that person? Try to put yourself in that person's shoes and not as yourself, right? Not as the person selling it, but put yourself in your customer's shoes. If that's hard to do, talk to a customer. And that's why you need researchers like myself to ask that question, right? What are your goals? Why would you need insurance? And when you're trying to buy this type of insurance right now, what are your pain points? That means like, what's stopping you from buying, right? Because that might help you address like, well, like it might be as simple as like your phone line might not be being answered by your representatives. Right? They could easily say, well, I actually want to buy it, but I keep on calling and no one's picking up the line. But we would never know that if we don't ask the question first. And then we can also ask them, what are your expectations? So like, goals are different from expectations, because like, my goal, why I'm going to buy this are these, but what do I expect to get out of it? Right? So, try to put yourself in your customer's shoes or ask the customers, what do you expect from this company? And what do you expect from buying the specific product? And then in terms of the journey, and this is really not set in stone. That's why I put together a couple of examples here in this deck, but it's just like a basic type of journey, right? So if someone is trying to think about buying something, they go through like the consideration phase, right? When they start still thinking about it, they're trying to consider it. They haven't made the decision yet. And then, when you're talking to, my advice as a researcher, obviously I'm biased about that, is I prefer you talking to real customers so you exactly know, and you're not just operating on your own assumptions, because we have assumptions. We have our, we're so close to the business that we have the danger of just biasing the potential thing that a real customer would tell us. So if you want to do real research, talk to a real customer. So you ask them, right, when you're on the stage of considering purchasing something, what are you thinking about? What are you feeling? What are you actually doing? And what are the tools that you're using? So for example, I'm shopping for is car insurance a good example?
Yeah.
Like if I'm shopping for car insurance, I haven't made a decision yet. I'm like, okay, like I think I need car insurance. I just bought myself a new car. What am I thinking? So maybe they'll say, thinking about, can I pay for it? Like, what are the rates that they have, right? So you ask them, right? They get and if you'll talk to more than one customer, then you'll get like this really good list of what they're thinking. What are they feeling? Feelings are important too, because they'll tell you why are they hesitant on getting it? What are their worries, right? And during that consideration part, what do they actually do, right? For example, like they haven't made a decision yet, they're still considering it. And you're asked, what do you do when you're still in your consideration portion or stage? They might tell you, I actually call my friends or I call my parents and I just ask them, what policy do you have? I'll just copy what you have. But we never know that. If we don't ask our customers, we'll never know. That's the whole point. And then touch points mean like when you're in this consideration phase, what do you actually use as tools? So touch points just means your channels. An example, they might say like, oh, I just Google it, or I just post this crowdsourcing on my social media status and say like, can you give me an idea what do I get? Or they can say that I go to these and this website. So now you identify for that specific stage what they think, what they feel, what they do, and what touch points are they actually using. And so you do the same thing, right? Their next stage could be when they're evaluating. Now they've gathered all this information. They might have researched multiple companies like your competitors, and they're now evaluating between policy, or maybe you have multiple options within that company. And now they just in the process of evaluating which specific ones would be more appropriate for them. And then, so you ask the same thing. So why would we need to do that? And you do that for these other stages as well. But why do we need to ask these questions? Because this is actually going to answer some of the questions that you've all raised to me earlier, right? When do we know when our clients would need a person to talk to? Or just they're okay with just using technology, right? So it's going to tell you that, yeah, when they're in the process of doing this, they're okay actually to interact with the website. But when they already know some options, that's when they need an agent. That's when we send our people. And it'll, when you ask them about touch points, then they can also tell you that, maybe an app is a bad idea. Maybe an app is a bad choice. Even if you already have this great idea of like a super duper really good app, but if you haven't heard it from your people, that your potential customers, that's probably not a good way to spend your money. When you're asking them what they think and what they feel, this also allows you to strategize on what you would want, the talking points for your agents. Right? Because now when they come face to face or on the phone with customers that are on these specific stages, you have an idea on what their worries are, how are they feeling at the moment. So you'll have that, a better connection. And correct me if I'm wrong here. At least in the experience that I have, just strategizing by getting this information from them, there's more genuine connection that you will make because you know what they're going through at that specific stage. Now, this example right here at the bottom is, usually some customer journey maps would have this, some don't. But what this actually shows you is, when I'm in this journey, and a journey could be, you see the number, right? So it refers to that, right? If I'm in consideration phase and that goes from step 1, 2, and 3, for example, you can ask your customer like how on a scale or on a spectrum of negative to positive experience in my current experience that I provide for you, how am I doing? So you can see that when they're in consideration phase, in this example, they're in a negative portion. and then they feel a little bit better when they're in the evaluation portion here. Again, this is just an example. But what this map kind of tells you is it helps you to prioritize, right? So as a business, you know, unfortunately, we don't have infinite source of funds. So at the end of the day, we know that we have multiple problems that we need to solve in our experience, but you're like, Jen, you know, which one should I do first? You would probably have different factors that you would consider in prioritizing, but this could be one of it, right? Because you might, when you're talking to your customers, you know, your map might be different. Like you might observe that it's high at this stage and you're only low when they're just considering their options. And so that's where you would direct your efforts or your resources. Do we have any questions before I proceed?
Okay, very interesting.
So in the right side of this is just showing like what potential insights. So usually when you're doing customer journey maps, like I mentioned, right, you would talk to more than one people because, you know, sample size, it's better, good research if you have representative sample of the people you're talking to. Then, you know, you synthesize your insights. You know, what are the key themes that you're getting out of the feedback that you heard? So what are the things that they're considering, right? What are the opportunities? What are the things that you can do as a company when your customers are in consideration phase? What are you lacking? What are the things that you need to address when you're in evaluation phase and when they're in closure phase, or when they're in post-purchase opportunities? The next, this is someone trying to buy a car. Again, it's not insurance, but like it's just showing you just a different form of mapping the journey, but it's a similar thought, right? The first one earlier, it's kind of telling you what questions are we asking, what, you know, what, how do we start even creating a map, a journey map. So here, this person is trying to just in the consideration phase, and here he is using an app. He saw a TV commercial, sees an ad on Facebook, and then they're exploring using a laptop and a phone, and then is detailing what his actual activities are, and so on and so forth, until they you know, do a comparison of the car that they're trying to buy, and then they're in the process of deciding which car to get. And so, you know, like I mentioned earlier, it tells you what touch points, meaning, you know, what forms of platforms or channels are customers actually using for these specific tasks, before you even solution, you know, what you would do as a company. What's important, what are they looking for, right? If you're gonna build a marketing material, or you're gonna, you know, put resources or money in a social media team, for instance, what are they even gonna post? What will people look for on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed? This is, you know, one activity that would let you build a strategy on your content for those as well. This is actually an insurance example, and probably would need help from our fellow panelists here for this. So this it tells about Julia, a 58 years old person who are trying to do a digital claims. A rock cracked her car's windshield. So for this, she's using a phone, you know, like they're, you know, think of, you know, whoever is the researcher for the insurance company, and this is from McKinsey and Company, asked Julia, how did she do it? She used a phone. She receives a push message, and then, you know, these are the messaging and the process that she needs to go through. So probably since you this is a use case for all of you, this is a good example to look into, right? Like how do you detail the step-by-step process for a similar scenario in your companies?
Jen, I have a question from the participants, from Mr. Manny Maloles. Would meeting with focus groups be necessary in developing your customer experience maps?
So I have so focus groups is kind of like pet peeves for UX researchers. So there's pros and cons to methods, right? If and when you really don't have time to do one-on-ones, then focus group is better than nothing. But you make sure you have a really, really good moderator to have a sound research or data out of that. Why do I say that? It's because when you put people together in one room, not all those people have the same types of personalities. You might feel that you have like 10 people or 5 or whatever, and you feel like, yeah, I have more than one. But really, how many people really speak in a focus group? Sometimes you have the really talkative ones, 1 or 2, and the rest are just quiet. And that's where a good moderator has to come in. They have to be able to like balance the conversation so you get feedback from everybody that you have in the room. You're not going to have that problem if it's a one-on-one conversation. So again, pros and cons, right? It'll take a little longer to do one-on-one with customers, but you would have more in-depth feedback. You also make sure that you give chance for different types of personalities, because you want that, right? Your customers are not the same people. You want to be able to get feedback from different types of individuals. And those are really hard to manage in a focus group. Focus groups are also a very marketing type of activity. And in terms of like a more customer experience, user experience, it's more of a preference to have a smaller group, like, or if you cannot do a 1:1 conversation, probably 2 would be the most advisable. And I can give a little bit more detail on that later. It's a methodology thing, right? When you do research, you do want to make sure that your methodology is sound for you to be confident of the outcome or the conclusions that you make out of that.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Manny, I hope that answers your questions. And there are a lot of questions in the Q&A, but since we're saving on time, we answered it already one-on-one. So I hope you take a look at the answers. We're down to our last 3 slides. So let's give the floor to Jen.
Yeah, so the rest of these are actually just, I wasn't planning to go over this in details anyway, but I just want to show you guys that we don't really, there's no one perfect journey map. And it's because we're operating different companies, different businesses, different industries. And so there's no one prescribed journey map. But, if there's one takeaway on what a journey map is, it would be this slide, right? You want to ask them what their goals are for that specific task, what their current problems are, what did they expect to get out of it, and have them walk you through the journey, the step-by-step process that they go through, and ask them what they think, what they feel, what they actually do, and what they use before you decide what to make, right? Because doing it this way in the first place would save you a ton of time and a ton of resources, because this would help you know that someone's actually going to use what you're planning to build.
I'm regretting that we didn't talk to you 2 months ago, because this exercise could have been done during the lockdown by our frontliners.
No, you have to hire Jen as a consultant.
Yeah, I have to come home to Philippines. Yay.
I'm sorry, Jen. There's a very important question here. I wanted to. It was in the Q&A, and it was asking that, because insurance is quite unique in the sense that we have a lot of customers that we consider indirect customers rather than direct customers. So there was a question here which says that it will a digital transformation of the insurance company conflict with their intermediaries? Does it have to necessarily conflict with intermediaries? What is your comment about that?
Yeah, I don't think it should. So there's, and we really need to have a second session because because there's also that piece about there are multiple like humans. When you're looking at the journey, right? It's not a single journey because you have multiple things, right? So in your question, right? So it could be in the same journey, but like we're detailing the customer journey earlier, but what's the journey of your agent for that? What's the journey of the indirect customer that you have for this similar use case? So in the companies that I work for, I'm gonna look for like an example that I can share. Unfortunately, I cannot share like internal document, but there's actually super big journey maps that actually detail all this intricate process of different people. So to give you an example, like I talked about the Honeywell project that I've had, like the one at Conrad Hotel, for example, right? So let's talk about that because, a hotel technology. So think about this automation system that would run your AC, that would run your security system or your fire alarm system, right? So if you're working on that product, but you're selling it, who is making a decision to buy that product? It's the hotel, right? It's the, whatever that brand is. Who installs it? It's the engineers. Mm-hmm. Who are the users? Who are the actual customers or ending up using these things, touching all these thermostats in the room? Mm-hmm. It's the hotel guests, yes, right? So these are these layers. At the end of the day, the hotel guests were not the one who paid for that product, but they're the ones using it, mm-hmm, right? So, I that question actually reminds me of that because there's like different layers of this. It's a complex for sign of a business that, sometimes the person who paid for the thing is actually not the user, right? When the buyer is not the user. So in this case, that you might have direct or indirect customers. You might have, I don't know, in other businesses, they have distributors and then they have like regional sales and then they have the actual customers. So it's a very similar thing. It's a layered conversation, but it doesn't, customer journey, the journey, right? Let's remove the word customer. So like there's the journey that has to be thought about. And when you think about seamless journey, it doesn't only look at the end-to-end for a specific person or human or stakeholder, but how does it hang together across these different roles that you have for a company?
Mm-hmm. Okay, not as simple as it looks, right?
Oh, but we can start simply. We can start with one. Agreed. Right? So like even companies with super mature CX or UX teams starts with one, and then you build it up from there. If you think about this as this big thing, you're never gonna start it. So start with a really small step, and it's hopefully it's gonna be an enjoyable activity, right? It's gonna be a group activity that you can all work together and build together over time. It also doesn't have to happen right away.
Okay. Jen, there's one interesting question here. Having Filipinos to deal with, how much personalization do we need to input to any digitalization effort? Is culture a factor?
It is a big factor. And I would be lying if I would call myself as an expert on, the Filipino psyche right now. Like I am a Filipino and it's more of a personal response, but I haven't studied Philippines for, over a decade. But to answer that question, there is too much personalization and then there's also too little. What you need to just understand is if there is personalization, it has to serve a purpose. right? So you know, and then we go back to research, right? You ask your customers, how do you, you know, how do you want the company to serve you? How would you, you know, what can we do to make you feel that we know you? That's usually the question that's how I ask that question. What are the things that companies do for you to feel that you're known to them, that they value you? Then let your customer answer you that question, right? You know, when you think of personalization as like, oh, they can change color to their account or whatever, that's a bad level of personalization, and that's probably doesn't serve a purpose. It's purely aesthetics. You would want to do away with just purely aesthetics, especially for digital. That's the easiest way to do, right? It's just a matter of like adding code or making them choose stuff. There's also like, there's the Filipino psyche, and there's also like a more Asian psyche, right? Like in terms of, you know, I hate, like, I want to correct myself, right? Like, aesthetics is not a simple thing, because aesthetics is part of personalization too. So there are some designs visually that works for, you know, very European and very Western client that might look like bland or unattractive to like the Asian market. So you can see like how websites are super quirky in like Japan or Korea, for example, but you would not put that out as a formal product if you're in the States, or especially in like Europe, right? In Scandinavian countries where it's like black and white and gray, you'd probably not want to have like, you know, cartoon characters all around. So one way to do that is also do a quick study on what, you know, let's, for example, if we're talking about apps or website right now, just do a quick study, do a competitive layout of what's ranked better, usability studies and benchmarking of like what's considered the most usable for that specific type of touch point or like a digital platform that you're looking into.
Okay, you know, we're already what, at almost 2 hours. We have more than 200 participants still online. So guys, can you just quickly chat whether you want to ask more questions or you want to continue the discussion for a few more minutes? Just type in your chat.
Or we can have the Q&A after everybody's left. I mean, not after those are interested to stay for the Q&A, stay for the Q&A.
Stay for more Q&A, yeah.
Appointment, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's possible too. But it's already 3 a.m. in Jen's country.
Yeah.
I know. I was worrying about Jen.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Don't worry.
Ito, we owe her big time.
Yeah,
super. Come back to the Philippines.
Yes.
I'm not hard to please. I just want Jollibee.
I was thinking of the tusok fish balls. Joke.
You know, it has to be gourmet if it's that.
Okay, so what do people want? Ang dami pang tanong, oh, later.
Oo nga eh.
Yeah, there are a lot of good questions.
We answered 12 already, Francis. So the ones that aren't answered pa. So what's the pleasure? Maybe you can chat, guys. So Jen, maybe we can turn the table up. Okay. Wow, okay.
Continue with exclamation.
Continue, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Jen, people love hearing you. All yours.
So, okay. So what, do we have any questions that we need to answer?
Yeah.
We can have a Q&A later, Jen. Maybe you'd like to show your last slides.
Okay. Hold on. I think that's actually the last one.
That's it.
The last one already.
Oh, well, we're in the Q&A. Okay. So let me read the questions. Aside from adapting to your customers' needs, have you instead changed the perception, beliefs, feelings of the customer and still succeeded in having them patronize your product? Oh, isn't that difficult? You
That's a tricky
manage your
question.
customer.
Yeah, that's a very tricky question to answer, and it's a very ethical question to
Oh,
answer.
okay.
So, you know, right, the ideal way is to really understand the needs of your customers. For you to build a solution, it has, you know, the principle of design is you don't make something if it's not going to solve a problem. That's just what good design means. There are companies though, right? Steve Jobs would, you know, when he was alive, he's probably, and some other great thinkers out there would probably say that people don't necessarily know what they want. But we're not asking people what they want, right? The whole point about like adapting to customer needs, we're not asking them, do you want a website? Do you want, you know, do you want to use an app to buy insurance? You don't ask that question. What you ask from them is, when you need to buy insurance, what are the difficulties that you're experiencing, and why are you experiencing that, right? So you're not necessarily, you know, you're not necessarily just asking them what they want, but you're you're trying to learn about the problems that they're experiencing, and then it's your job to try to address it. So you know, I know that that's like a roundabout answer, like trying to answer that question, but ethically speaking, I would prefer not to manipulate people. It can be done. It can be done, but let's leave that to advertising.
Jen, Shell was asking, are there tools that you recommend to make it easy for, let's say, the participants to start practicing the customer journey principles?
I like Shell's question. So I think I've shown you this before. So mural.co is one, and it's not the only tool. So they're free, you know, they're free accounts that you can use. And so if you have, you know, try it out at your own home later. So Mural actually has templates for customer journey maps already. So you know, it's just a glorified like online post-it exercise. You know, it's nothing so fancy of it, but like in a pandemic world, right, that you cannot be in the same room together. You can actually, here's an example, right? Like you have multiple people working through it, and then you can move around, post it like as if you're in the same room together, and then you can build the map that I was showing earlier for you. If you're not into this thing, I think I mentioned before, you know, it can also be just like a spreadsheet, right? Because it's just, you know, what is a journey? Right? It's a linear thing, and you have multiple layers. It's really like a table. It's not as pretty as this one. It's not as colorful and interactive, but it can be done, right? I think, you know, if the idea of like learning another tool would stop you from making the first steps, then so be it. Just use the tools that you already have. But this is an example of it. What's the other one? I can send you list of stuff too. Trello, it's a Trello board, and you know, it's showing like process, and you can do Kanban boards for that, but you can be creative and use it as, you know, for your mapping exercises as well. Any graphic tool would be useful too, like InVision, for example. Sorry. The question of tools, what in terms of research, you know, when we're asking questions, usertesting.com is useful for us as well. I'm not really sure if they have, if it's in Philippines, but try it out. So usertesting.com is like, you can put a link on your existing website, or add questions that you need to ask from your customers. It'll recruit participants for you, or you can send out link for that test to your participants. So if you don't, right now we cannot do in-person interviews with your customers, you can just send a link and have them answer your questions from there. Their responses will be recorded as videos. So it's, sometimes videos are very powerful, like in research, especially in leadership, like executive leadership. You can build like the super fancy brief or a report, but and you would have a very skeptic room. But then, you have a recording of an actual customer telling everybody their difficulties in using your product or your service, then you have a captive audience because it comes directly from your customers. So that's an example of a tool. Dscout, as in letter D, and then Scout, dscout.com is like a diary tool. So, right, like if if you're familiar with, research methods at all, like you sometimes, especially for someone planning to buy insurance, right? They don't make that decision in one day, right? It could prolong itself to multiple days, or I don't know how long. This is a tool that we use for similar processes, right? We give a task, we recruit people. Do you have, like in Best Buy example, for instance, do you have any plans of purchasing a home theater system at certain point? And they say yes, and we include them in the study. And then so we're like, okay, here are your tasks. Like, talk to us what you're thinking in each day. How did you do your research? What things are you trying to look for? So it's very similar, right? If you're a potential insurance customer or client is thinking through what they need to buy, what are they looking for? What questions are they asking? If you have like, this digital diary tool that you have for your customers, you're actually like in their heads, in their homes, and they're submitting this video or written feedback for you. It's very different from like just having a focus group in 1 hour, because you're actually, you're like in the process with them, right? So it's almost in real time that they're relating their story for you. So it helps the story of, telling the story of their journey as well. What else? There's also the activity of like building personas, and that the example that I've given earlier about customer journey maps, wherein we focus on a specific customer or a client role, or role of people working within the company, interacting with your customers. Persona is really just like getting a representation of one big group, right? Because we cannot we cannot possibly account for everybody, but there is definitely commonalities between within a specific group, and you just want to be able to talk through that and to have something tangible, right? Because it's different when you're talking about, oh, this is Annie. Hold on. They usually in personas, they have like very catchy names. So choosy Chona, for example, like if it's like a customer that's super choosy and very picky about the questions that he or she would have. And then, so what are the things that this choosy Chona would be looking for, and how are we going to address the needs for this specific person or, persona or a client? There's a lot of interesting things, and like I would really suggest for you guys to like also think through like maybe a webinar for these specific things if it's of interest to the group as well. Any other questions? I could go on and on.
Okay. Any other question?
Well, we were able to answer those on the Q&A.
Okay, so I guess we can let Jen go. Anyway, she'll come back next week.
We'd like to thank all the participants who joined us, all 250 of them. And we'd like to give a very big thank you to Dr. Jen. Jen,
yeah,
very God-given. Thank you very much.
Yeah, wonderful talaga, Jen.
From the comments that we're getting from the participants, they all appreciate it, and we do too.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
being such great co-panels and for being such great participants.
I'd just
Have a
like to
great
remind the participants there's this post-webinar survey. So just one question. Please answer it.
And we'll see if we can get Jen back.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jen.
Yes,
Tons
yes.
of information, really.
Part two, part two.
Part 2. Okay, so thank you everybody also for tuning in. So you join
Yeah,
us
let's-
next week for another
Yeah.
webinar. Don't
Oh
forget.
wait, there's one more. May pahabol.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a thank you.
Just a thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Jen,
let's
promise when you get here, it's gonna be more than fish balls. Promise.
Yeah.
And thank you, Shell, for getting Jen to join us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'd like to remind everybody who's still here, all 157 of them, we're still going to have another session, and this is on banking. And we got friends from the banking industry is going to tell us on how the banking industry can help our own digital transformation. So it promises to be interesting as well.
Okay.
Jen, thank you very much. Ito.
Yeah,
Thank you, CPI.
Thank you.
CPI.
Thanks,
Thank
Ren,
you.
Francis, and Mitch. We appreciate, yes, we appreciate the partnership.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Yes,
Jen. Super
thanks.
thank you.
I'll see you,
Matulog ka
Jen.
na.
You can sleep now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Jen.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Wait, bye-bye. Thank you.